What is going on, Diablo 2 fans? Dobrunsky here. In today's video, I'm going to be applying a tier list to all of the new level 85 areas that have been introduced into patch 2.4. So I do want to point out that there's so many different factors that you need to take into consideration when you're ranking these areas against each other. So, is it easy to find on a map? Are you playing on Battle.net? Are you playing on single player with static maps? Are the immunities favorable to certain types of builds, like cold immunities, fire immunities, lightning immunities, etc.? How does that impact the build that you'll actually MF? And also, what is the monster density like? So I tried to take all of these factors into consideration when I was ranking them, but I do want to mention that this is just a tier list relative to all of the new level 85 areas. So I'm not going to compare them to the existing ones, because that would make for a very long video. And I do also want to point out that even though I do have some D tier list areas in this video, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're worse to farm than like the Blood Moor in Act 1 or something like that. It's still a level 85 area that can drop every item in the game. So obviously, relatively speaking, it's going to be better than farming some random zone in hell difficulty. Now with that being said, let me know in the comment section below if you guys agree or disagree. That could be a very controversial video, but there's just so many factors to take into consideration. But I do genuinely think that this list is pretty spot on. And again, a quick reminder before we jump in though, just want to let you guys know that I do stream twice a week on Twitch. So if you guys enjoy my YouTube content, any follows on that platform would be very much appreciated. Got the link for my Twitch channel in the description below. That being said, guys, let's jump in. So the first location that I want to talk about is the Underground Passage Level 2. Now, in my personal opinion, this is not a great area to magic find, and there's a couple of reasons why I think that. The first is that you have 4 types of immunities here, so fire, lightning, cold, and poison, so it doesn't really cater to a budget sorceress build. Now, with that being said, you can break the lightning immunities here with Infinity, but the fact that you have very low monster density, combined with an area that is a little bit more challenging to map find. It's not impossible, but you need to start out in the Darkwood or the Black Marsh, make your way forward or backwards to the Underground Passage, then to the Underground Passage Level 2 to magic find a very tiny area that has poor monster density and 4 types of immunities. I just think when you take that all into consideration, it's kind of a less than ideal area. If I wanted to magic find somewhere in Act 1, I would stick to the pits. I just think it's better. You get the whole pit level 1 and pit level 2. Now, with that being said, I will admit that it was kind of fun magic finding a different set tile, because the Underground Passage Level 2, it's its own set standard tile. Same with the pit level 2, so it was kind of interesting farming a different standard tile, but that's going to wear off really quickly. So I think if you just take everything into consideration, a little bit more challenging to map find, 4 types of immunities, and low monster density, I personally can't really rate this any higher than a D tier location compared to all the other level 85 areas that I have on this list. So the next area that I want to talk about is the Stoney Tombs. Now I have this rated very high on my tier list for a number of reasons. The first is that it's a super easy area to map find. So basically the second you exit Loot Ghislaine, it's located in the Rocky Waste. So you're not kind of teleporting to multiple areas similar to the Underground Passage. Just leave Loot Ghislaine and it's right there. So especially on single player where you roll a static map, you can actually have it right outside the city entrance. That's really good. The second kind of key upside to this location is that there is no fire or cold immune monsters. So if you want to MF a different location besides the Ancient Tunnels, this might be the area for you. And I especially like the fact that we can rock like a budget Hydra Sorceress or budget Fireball Sorceress. We're not kind of forced to go down that route of always being a Blizz Sorceress, so that's what I really like about Stoney Tombs. The only kind of downside is that you need to go in there with at least some semi-decent lightning resistance, because the beetles, unless you're playing like a Fire Trapsin or a Hydra Sorceress where you can kind of hang back, you don't really want to be taking lightning damage from them with a squishy budget character when you have like negative 50 lightning res. So you might want to get semi-decent gear before you jump into this location. But besides that, it has relatively decent monster density. I mean, there's multiple levels. It's not a very tiny location like the Underground Passage Level 2. And you can magic find it with a budget cold or fire sorceress, and then you can just completely obliterate with a really good fire character or really good cold character. So taking all of those into consideration and the fact that it's a relatively easy area to magic find, and the monsters basically are pushovers minus the beetles, I personally rated the Stoney Tombs as a S tier area to magic find. I think that this will be a meta shifting area, and you'll see a lot of budget Blizzard and fire sorceresses magic finding the Stoney Tombs. So the next location that I want to talk about is the Arachnid Lair. Now in my personal opinion, this is going to replace the Ancient Tunnels as the new meta farming location for cold sorceress builds. Now the reason why I personally think this is because it is so much easier to map find than the Ancient Tunnels. Now it's not that the Ancient Tunnels is horrible to magic find. I mean, it's in the Lost City. You just go to the Lost City waypoint and then you just kind of teleport around and randomly find it. but it does take some time to find. Now, there is no cold immune monsters, and that's the reason why it's such a great location for a budget Blizzard sorceress. But where the Arachnid's Lair kind of beats it is the fact that the Arachnid's Lair is always located right next to the Spider Force waypoint in Act 3. So as soon as you get that waypoint, every new game that you make on Battle.net with your kind of randomized maps, you're going to be able to find it a lot quicker. Now, it is true that, I guess if you reroll a static single-player map, that you can have the Ancient Tunnels waypoint, the Ancient Tunnels trapdoor right next to the waypoint, but considering most people are probably playing Battle.net, you'll be able to find this location consistently a lot easier. Now, it does have no cold immune monsters as well. Again, they're relatively easy monsters to kill with a budget sorceress. Like, honestly, a naked Blizzard sorceress, as long as you're just staying back and being careful, you can clear everything completely fine. You have a sparkly chest that can drop more stuff than Ancient Tunnels. Now, I will admit that the map layout design, it might be a little bit more awkward, but it has similar monster density, and it's a very large location as well. So the fact that it's easier to map find, and there has no cold immune monsters and decent monster density, I personally rate the Arachnid's Lair as an S tier location. It's one of the only 2 on my list, and I do honestly think that it will become the next Ancient Tunnels. So we just finished covering 2 S tier locations, so why not follow that up with a horrible magic finding location? So we're going to talk about the Swampy Pit level 1, 2, and 3. Now first we'll talk about some of the positives. The first being it's relatively easy to map find. So similar to the Arachnid's Lair, if you take the Flare Jungle waypoint, Swampy Pit is always going to be located right next to it. So that's a plus. And there's also no cold immune monsters and no fire immune monsters on level 1 and level 3. So is favorable to some type of elemental damage dealing builds. But that being said, the area is very restrictive. It's not free-flowing, so very tight, narrow corridors with other locations that have like ponds and stuff that kind of restrict where you can move. So you combine that with dolls running at you to blow up in your face and souls shooting intense lightning damage at you. It's a recipe for a horrible area to MF in my opinion. And in addition to that, the level 3 area, if you don't have Enigma, it's horrible. It's like literally like a rat maze, and it's just horrible to get around unless you can teleport and jump between walls. So low density, the horrible free-flowing map pattern, and then having dolls and souls makes this, in my opinion, a brutal area to MF. I would not go to this spot unless you're looking for something different and you have a very high-end character, because I typically, when I'm magic finding, I'll often go on autopilot, and this is not an area where you can autopilot. You will end up dying. So taking all those factors into consideration, I cannot rate this area any higher than D tier, even though there is some favorable immunities. I just think it's one of the worst locations in comparison to everything else on this list. Now, in addition to the Swampy Pit, we have 3 new temples that have been bumped up to level 85. Now, that's one thing that I do want to point out, is that you will notice there's a lot of new Act 3 level 85 areas, and I do think that's good because for the most part, we would only spend time magic finding Mephisto or Travancore, so it's nice to see some more variety. And with that being said, there are already existing temples that are level 85, but people don't really focus on magic finding them because they don't have really good monster density. They're actually pretty poor. I think I've gone through them with sometimes only having like 1 boss spawn, maybe up to 3. Now, I do think that some of these are better than others, but I will kind of include them as one. The Disused Fane, though, has every type of elemental immunity. So fire, lightning, cold, poison, physical, and magic. It really doesn't get much worse than that. I would imagine most people are never going to touch this area. It is true that some of these immunities can be broken with Infinity, but it is a pretty bad location. One advantage to the Ruined Temple and Forgotten Reliquary, though, is that there's no lightning or poison immunes in this location. So you could, in theory, magic find them with maybe a budget lightning sorceress or maybe a budget poison necro. So there's some potential there. So I don't think that they're horrible, but they still suffer from overall monster density. Now, with that being said, the Ruined Temple does have Serena there, so there's definitely more magic finding density, but unless they've fixed it, there's a bug where super uniques outside of Pindle and Thresh Socket are capped to drop TC78 items only. So I do want to make that aware that if you're going to spend time focusing on Serena only, don't expect to get the same drop as Pindle. But I do think the fact that there's no lightning immunities, I would rate them a little bit higher. So that's why I actually gave the Ruined Temple an A tier rank. So it's one of the few A tier builds, or excuse me, one of the few A tier level 85 locations to magic find. But I gave the Disused Fane and Forgotten Reliquary B tier. So the final Act 3 location on this list is the Sewers level 1. Now I'm going to be entirely honest, I had a lot of reservations on where I should rank this on the tier list. It does have a few things against it, but I think there's more positives and negatives for farming the sewers level 1. So let's talk about some of the positives. First is that it's relatively easy to map find. So if you start in Kuros or Upper Kuros, there's numerous places where you can enter the sewers. On top of that, there's no fire immune monsters. So with a budget Hydra Sorceress or budget Fireball Sorceress, you can mow down all the monsters in this area, no problem. Now, in terms of talking about some of the types of monsters, there is dolls in this location, but I did find that you can reposition yourself with a quick teleport to be on the other side of a moat, so the dolls aren't kind of running up into your face and blowing up like they would in the Swampy Pit. And on top of that, you do have the sewers level 2, which always was a level 85 area. Now, there's not really a lot of monsters down there, but there's definitely a couple nice super chests that you can pop for maybe getting the chance of a high rune. So I think when you take everything into consideration, relatively large map, numerous entrance points, no fire immune monsters, pretty solid monster density, just having to be a little bit weary of dolls, I decided to rate this area as an A tier magic fighting location. Definitely don't think it's worthy of B, C, or D, but I don't think it's quite an S tier location. So we're finally moving on to Act 5, and the next 3 locations I'm going to include is 1, that is the Abaddon Infernal Pit, and I always mess this up, Pit of Arachnid, I think that's how you pronounce it. Now, these are the red portals in Act 5. Now, honestly, I don't think, in general, they're very good for magic fighting, and I think it's for a lot of reasons. The first is that the monster density is not horrible, but the monster density is not great either. In addition to that, there is a whole whackload of different immunities, which can be a problem. The only area that doesn't have any immunities is the Pit of Arachnid. It has no lightning immune, so you could maybe magic find with a lightning sorceress that doesn't have infinity, but there is some nasty monsters in this location, so really big bloodlords and other stuff that you just have to deal with. Now, it's stylistically a very nice looking area, and I do think that it provides some different kind of areas to magic find. In terms of being very challenging monsters to kill, because we're in Act 5 now, not really favorable immunities, and then not great density, I rated the Pit of Arachnid C tier, only because of the no lightning immunes, and then I rated the Abaddon and Infernal Pit as D tier. So the final 2 locations that we're going to cover is the Drifter Cavern and the Icy Cellar. Now these are areas that would be pretty good if you could kind of tone down the strength of the monsters, but obviously they're not going to do that. It's Act 5, some of the hardest monsters in the game, including Succubus, Dolls, Moonlords, and Bloodlords. They're all found in Gloams too. They're all found in these locations, so they're not ideal unless you go in with a really good character. Now, the Drifter Cavern has all types of elemental immunities. Now, that might actually look deceiving because for the most part, there's no fire immunes. It's only the Moonlords or the Bloodlords, I'm not sure what their name is, that you have to deal with. They're fire immune only in the Drifter Cavern, but for the most part, you can go in there with a fire damage dealing character and you can make out okay. But again, Succubus, Dolls, Gloams, just the combination of those 2 monsters in the Icy Cellar and the Drifter Cavern makes it a very challenging area to MF with a weak character. Now, the Icy Cellar has a little bit of an advantage over the Drifter Cavern in the sense that there's 0 fire immunes in that location, so you can go in there with a fire sorceress, but the only difference between the Drifter Cavern and the Icy Cellar, besides the 1 fire immune monster, is one has Succubus and Bloodlords, the other one, that is the Drifter Cavern. The Icy Cellar has Dolls and Gloams. So basically, pick your poison. But one of the other advantages to this location is the fact that those evil urns can actually spawn you additional monster packs. And the locations themselves are not actually too challenging to map find. It's to the left of the waypoint to go to the Drifter Cavern, and it's to the right of the waypoint to go to the Icy Cellar. So they're relatively easy to map find, pretty solid monster density, and for the most part favorable to fire damage dealing characters, but you have to deal with some very, very tough challenging monsters. So if you're looking for an area to challenge yourself, these might be good locations for you, but if you're looking for areas that you can turn off on autopilot, MF with max MF setups, and then just get tons of items, you're probably going to want to focus on the Stoney Tombs. So taking all that into consideration, I decided to rate the Icy Cellar as a B tier just because of the no fire immunes, and I rated the Drifter Cavern as a C tier. So that is a complete wrap-up of my tier list for the new level 85 areas. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you found it informative. If you did, if you could throw a like on it, that'd be awesome. Helps sort of spread the video through the YouTube algorithm. That'd be much appreciated. But yeah, guys, let me know in the comment section below if you guys agree or disagree with any of the areas that I listed off. And I'll catch you on my next video or live stream. Peace out.